Hello and welcome to the next episode of The Prestige, a podcast about films, filmmaking and film theory.
In each programme we'll focus on a particular movie, we're going to review it, talk about it and discuss some of the ideas, be they filmic, be they cultural, that it throws up.
And we'll always end with recommendations for films to watch, probably based on that discussion, so wherever that discussion takes us in terms of films or wider culture, and the links are going to be as closer as tenuous as we want.
But before all that, the question asked is, who are we and why should you care? So my name is Rob Mathon. I am a filmmaker. I've spent the last 10 years or so working in the British film industry, and these days I've retired from the Hollywood game, and I live in Shropshire and I take photos and I write things. My colleague is Sam Dr. Knowles, who is a very well-educated lecturer and writer on critical and literary theory. He writes about movies, he writes about books, he writes about films and everything else kind of culturally that he takes a fancy to.
Great. So, this, by the way, my middle name has never been Doctor.
I feel my middle name's been Doctor since you were at 12, so...
Right. So this week, Rob, it was your turn.
It was indeed. It was my turn, and I chose to go with the very recent film, the 2015 film, The Martian.
I guarantee you that at some point, everything's going to go south on you.
Ready?
And you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end.
Commander, Mark is dead. We have to go now.
Directed by Ridley Scott, starring Matt Damon, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of Sam doing impressions later in the episode, with support from Jessica Chastain, Kirsten Wiig, Sean Bean, Jeff Daniels, Kate Mara, a whole host of people. Oh yeah, I know them. And it details Matt Damon's character Mark Watney, who is a Mars astronaut who is accidentally left behind on a emergency evac. A Martian home alone, if you will. He then has to, as he puts it, science the shit out of that place to survive however many 100 days till he can be rescued. And then the support are NASA, JPL and his astronauts sort of rallying around him to sort of rescue him. But it's very much Matt Damon's film, and it's very much he's the lead and he is the main character through almost the entire thing, if you don't count Mars as a character itself. Sam, what do you think?
Well, firstly, I've been told in no uncertain terms that I can really stop doing that impression now. It's been 8 years and it wasn't funny at the time. So you won't be hearing from me in this podcast. So yes, good things first. I thought it was I really liked the way it looked, the cinematography, the editing, the acting. There's a quite phenomenal cast that you've mentioned there, and they're all, with a couple of exceptions, quite like, but lots and lots of the main players are really on the game here. My problem was that it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Channeling Rob Gordon for a minute. I wanted it to be a top 5 film. I don't necessarily have a favourite film, but I've got a few on rotation. The Sting for I think narrative near perfection. It's always one of my favourite films. Die Hard 2 for emotive resonance, and also When I Want to Wind Rob Up.
Such a bad film.
the new
Such a bad film.
Yeah, Rob. Best Christmas film ever. The new Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig Casino Royale, I really like for the overall spectacle of it. And I also like Empire Strikes Back as possibly like the best example of a film that doesn't end with a happy ending. I really like it for that. Anyway, I wanted The Martian to join that company, and it didn't quite. I was anticipating it, looking forward to it. Really, I really did want it to be amazing, and well, I don't know. I think it might have suffered for me because of the times when it got a bit dull and he was alone on the planet, and I think that might have been the point. So this might be me missing it completely, but I just felt that I really like the action sequences, the dialogue, particularly because the actors involved were so good. I felt really gripped by what was going on, apart from the cheesy, the whole world is looking out for Watney at the end, and when they flip between Times Square and Trafalgar Square. I didn't know it. But in general, I thought the action sequences, I say action sequences, there isn't much action certainly in the middle act, but the sequences where things happen, things happen between the characters, I really like those, and I kind of wish there were more of those, and I kind of got a bit bored by the big, epic, sweeping landscape, which is probably me being a Philistine, but there you go. I just say we had amazing seats for this, and it was incredible. Okay, so the first couple of times seeing Mars and thinking, wow, what's Ridley Scott done here? How has he done it? This is amazing. That was pretty good. But after that, it just left me a bit cold in the middle.
Fair enough. Well, not want to disagree with you entirely, but I disagree with you entirely.
Okay, good.
No, in fairness, I don't. And first of all, have you read the book, Sam?
I have not, no.
Okay. No, I've read the book, and I've been a big fan of the book since it came out. So I went into this with, I suppose, similar expectations to you that it was going to blow me away, having been blown away by the book. And I would say you're right, it isn't a top 5 film in the way I kind of wanted it to be. But I do think I probably liked it more than you seem to. I really liked the stuff that was Matt Damon on the planet doing his stuff. I was less interested in the astronauts and that sort of stuff. I was all about the Matt Damon story.
Yeah.
I really liked, as we often discussed in this film, this is a film that is sold by nobody punching anybody else.
Yes, I thought that was brilliant.
At no point, I mean, I think apart from Matt Damon occasionally punching various bits of technology, it was a film that was solved by smart people doing smart things. It isn't a film. The humour doesn't come from a place of people being dumb or being selfish or mean. I mean, yes, it can be a bit rah-rah science at times. It can be a bit rah-rah humanity. But I like the fact that everybody in this film cares, and everyone in this film works hard and is talented and smart, and in an age which is at the same time very technological, but at the same time very almost anti-science in many ways. It was great from my point to see a film that was, no, actually, science is brilliant, and science will solve these things for you.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think that the acting was top notch. I think. I think Jeff Daniels was a bit stilted at times.
Yes.
And I'm not sure Donald Glover was from the same film as everybody else.
I did quite like that though. Only he was obviously from Jurassic World. He wasn't from this film, but I did quite like it. I did quite like his sort of Jeff Goldblum-esque typing with one hand kind of thing that he had going on.
Yes, and I like Donald Glover, and I like that a character, but in a film that's almost so rooted in reality. I mean, infamously, all the science in this film is real. the only leap they made was that spacesuits get more and more flexible, and you can get in yourself.
And also the atmosphere on Mars wouldn't have allowed that storm to take place. That was one thing that Andy Weir said. Okay, we'll have this at the beginning.
But the Rich Pennell manoeuvre is a genuine manoeuvre that you could have done, and the writer Andy Weir did work out the relative distances of Earth and Mars, and so he knew exactly when it is, and all that sort of stuff. So the science is good, but his character felt like he's a super hacker. Look at him with his weirdness and his chalkboard on the wall, and for some reason sitting in a server room with the servers rather than actually using networks, which I'm sure JPL has networks.
Why was he doing that? It was never explained.
In the real world, you use supercomputers to check all the maths of your calculations. Why he was sitting in the server room being cold with a USB, I have no idea. And I think that's where sometimes I lost my love of the film. Well, as you say, some things just got a little bit tropey. The shots at the end where the world rallying round money. I mean, I grant you, in a situation like this, I'm sure the world would be watching. If we left a guy on Mars, the world would be watching. But it was a little bit like, well, here's a shot of London, and here's a shot of Russia, and here's a shot of France that we've seen 1,000 times. And the Rich Pennell character at times also felt a bit like, well, they needed a slightly weird hackery guy, so they went put him through these same tropes rather than reality, if you see
Actually,
but on the whole, I really liked it.
That made me think of the bookmarking of World War Z. Actually, the use of it was done much better in World War Z with the use of fake found footage and sort of news broadcasts and things like that. I think that was a much better handling of it than this sort of stock. As you say, this is a shot of Paris, this is a shot of people looking tense in New York. Whereas the way that they did it in World War Z, it felt much more real. It felt much more, this is the way that 24/7 news networks would handle an event like this.
Exactly. And I think there's always going to be an element in films where you have exposition by news reporter. So where you have the scene where they talk to the camera and that explains to you what's going on. And that is whilst being a trope, also is a useful tool in films. But at times I felt this film strayed towards that. But on the whole, I left it really enjoying the film and really loved it. I mean, and I thought it had the right balance of humour. And I think Matt Damon has detractors across the board. But I thought that he brought that right mix of steely determination and humour. And to move into spoiler territory a little bit, right at the end when he's rescued and he's caught by Jessica Chastain, at his final spoiler, he survives. There's a moment there where in a lesser film it would have been tears and oh my god you saved me and that kind of thing. But in this film is you have terrible taste in music.
Yeah.
And it was just like that felt to me like where you actually you like Mark, you genuinely like Mark, and you want him to survive, and I think that helps. In the film, there are 2 or 3 times in which things go badly wrong for him. In the book, there are probably 2 or 3 more where it goes wrong, and you genuinely want him to do well because he's such a nice bloke. I think the book does the same trick where they don't have a backstory for him. You don't really know much about Mark beyond where he went to university and that he has parents, and that helps you to kind of project at times onto him. Like his blank slateness means that we all kind of like I can see him in me and me in him, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that
sorry. Go, no. I was
after you.
I was thinking there was something else about You mentioned the moment with Matt Damon and Jessica Chastain at the end. I was thinking of another moment with Rooney Mara and her squeeze, and you kind of see the beginning of their relationship, where he's going out to do something dangerous, and she kisses him on the outside of his helmet, and. That was one of the most moving things in the whole film, but it's ridiculous. because that's the sort of thing that would happen in real life. And there was no sort of straying into Hollywood territory, and you saw them like getting together in some other way in the spaceship. That was the one moment of tenderness between them you saw, and then you saw where their relationship had gone later, much later. But I thought that was really well handled, and that's along the same lines as that you have terrible taste in music line. This felt real.
Yes. I think that's one of the big sellings of the film, and one of the big sort of marketing pushes is that it is real, that the maths and the science is real. And I think that they did well. And I think that there's a lot of little things like that in the film where almost all the characters, even the bit parts back in NASA, felt like rounded characters. I think that's the power of having such good actors or such renowned actors in these roles, is they all felt like a real person. That you could tell the difference between the different bureaucrats at NASA. You know, that Jeff Daniels' character was clearly a different person to Sean Bean's character, who was clearly a different person to Benedict Wong's character. And they all had, and it was all kind of done in like really small little ways, where you're like, oh no, I get that's a different person. It never felt like a blank, faceless wall of techies, which often these films can sort of devolve into.
Yeah, that was it. One thing, one of the things I didn't like about the acting, and I would agree with you actually, Jeff Daniels was at times a bit sort of falling into his hammy role as head of. He seems to have entered a period in his life where every role he plays is just head of an American agency. At one sort or another. I thought he just felt like he was coasting sometimes. The other thing I didn't like was Sean Bean.
Really?
And I couldn't understand why he was there, because you had the brilliant Chiwetel Ejiofor putting on an exemplary American accent. Why did there have to be an Englishman? This is my point. And I wasn't sure. I had it put to me afterwards that actually this is a sign of the global nature of NASA and the harmony of space exploration and things like that, and you would have an Englishman as part of this team, just like you had an American, but you had a sort of a Chinese American with Benedict Wong, and showing from different cultures coming together, and just as you had with the Chinese government helping out. But I just wasn't sold on Sean Bean at all.
I will forgive his presence simply based on the Lord of the Rings joke that they made. That to me was awesome enough that I will forgive the presence. But I do see what you're saying, that I like Sean Bean, but he has a certain personality and style he brings to a character. He is infamously rough around the edges. He is that kind of burly man's man character. And I'm all up for actors trying to play with that, but he didn't seem to play with it. He just kind of played the same character, and we're supposed to buy that he's this flight commander of NASA. And obviously, burly men can be that kind of flight commander, but at the same time, you're like, he seemed out of sync with the other characters like Vincent Kapoor and Teddy Sanders.
Yeah.
We won't dive into it too much, but it is worth noticing that Vincent Kapoor played brilliantly. In the original film, is called it's a much more Indian sounding name.
Right.
I'm just trying to think. Okay, and there a few of the characters in the film have changed race.
In which direction are we talking about?
In all directions. Donald Glover's character, Rich Pennell, wasn't African American in the book, but Mackenzie Davis's Mindy Park was clearly a Korean American in the book. So it has been changed, and like part of me is like, that's brilliant. They clearly went for who's the best person for the role, put them in that role. And I think that's wonderful. But I think anyone who's into films has certainly been burnt by that in the past, and you're always a bit like, whenever that kind of stuff happens, which I'm sure is a knee-jerk reaction and a bad one at that. But it was notable that they have done this. So on balance, I'm like, fair enough. They've kind of gone with the best actor for the role. Brilliant. But I'm sure there has been outcry from various quarters about that. But it's not something I particularly want to get into because I don't overly agree with it. But I do think that this does buy into a larger sort of idea of what I'll tentatively call solo survival movies.
Yes.
And there have been these through almost every genre of the world over, but the idea that there's one man against the elements. So, like, you haven't really got a antagonist. I mentioned earlier that Mars was kind of a character in the film, but it isn't an antagonist in the traditional sense. It isn't doing anything to try to kill him or hurt him. It's just the obstacles you overcome.
Yes, that's the thing that he makes a point of saying that Mars isn't the enemy. This is not what... And the enemy is the fact that I'm a human in the wrong place.
Yes. I think the obvious touchstone for a lot of this, and this making up later in some recommendations, is Castaway. Castaway.
I was wondering how long is it? I was wondering how long it would be before you mentioned that film.
Oh, I like the film. I like the film. I like it. I haven't brought in a recommendation for next week later on, but that obviously is another big one recently that was like one man by himself, and whilst there was other actors at the start and the end, it is about one guy overcoming things. It's about him just kind of sciencing out how to get out. So he builds, I mean, it's a lot less sciencey, but he builds himself a raft. He copes with he builds fire. It's much more kind of amateurish, but it's all about how he copes. And I think that the Martian doesn't do a lot with kind of emotional, how it affects him mentally. There's a few jokes here and there about ketchup and that kind of stuff, but you don't see that big breakdown the way you do with Castaway.
Yeah, that was something that felt a bit grating, was that his breakdown, in inverted commas, appeared to be confined to about 5 minutes where he grew a beard and insisted they called him Captain Blogbeard.
Yes,
because he was a pirate, and that was all the mental instability he had. He was very strong, in inverted commas, up until that point.
I think that part of this comes from maybe the American heroisation of astronauts as a breed apart, as in that kind of idea that the astronauts are the best of us. And I'm not saying they're not. To be an astronaut certainly is you have to be the best, and all that kind of stuff. But I do think there's this idea in America that the astronauts are these unflappable, unkillable, unstoppable forces of humanity. And I think that's why you probably get a lot of these kind of man-alone ones tend to be in space, or woman-alone ones. Obviously, the other one recently is Gravity. This is another single actor in space overcoming the odds of thing. Whereas I think there's an inherent difference between something like Gravity, which is much more of a survival story, whereas this is much more of a science story. Like with sort of the two sides I see often of these solo films is some are about surviving the instant. So something like 127 Hours, where a man gets trapped by this rock. It's about him surviving that. It's an experience that he goes through and survives it. And then you can think of The Martian, and possibly I'm trying to think of another film that's like maybe Into the Wild, where it's actually about working out how to overcome it. It's more of a film about the process rather than the experience. I think that these solo films can fall into those two categories at times.
And that's something you get, more. Well, actually, you've already cut up the spoiler that he survives. So there's something that this film does right at the end is show Watney passing on his knowledge of having survived that to others. So the fact of having survived, the experience of what he's gone through, is something that he passes on to others at the end of the film, and that's important to him.
I think it is as a bit of interest. That was one of the bits that was added from the book. The book ends as he gets aboard the Hermes.
Right.
So everything back on Earth after in the book is an addition of the screenplay. Which I think, given it was originally released as a serial story, week on, week off, as it were, I totally get why it ended there in the book, but I also completely understand why you've got that extra coda on the film. to kind of tie it all together.
I really liked that in the film. I did like the way it tied it together at the end.
And I mean, in the books he has, because the book's a lot more his kind of video diary, and he has that nice speech at the end of the book where he talks about humanity coming together and overcoming stuff, and they kind of transpose that onto his speech in the classroom. But no, for a big addition to the book, and being a big book fan, I was very happy with that kind of addition on the end. I thought it really worked.
Yeah, that's another. Well, I suppose again we've been looking at a series of films recently where you play around with source material in different ways, and that can be something that works in the book, and you have to find a new way of presenting it in a film. And that goes back to what I was saying last week, that I find tiring the argument about it not being as good as the book, because it's a different thing, and you should rejoice in the fact that you can do different things in this new medium.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think like one of the big adaptations of our time was the Watchmen adaptation, and I'm a big fan of that comic book, but I wasn't a big fan of the film, and it's because they didn't do anything interesting with it as a film, as opposed to being a live action comic.
Oh, okay.
And I think I'm sure
I haven't seen the film at all. That passed me by.
It's the Watchmen film. It's pretty and it's good, but it is literally they almost used I imagine they did use the comic book as a storyboard, and it's a fine adaptation. But I'm not sure if I've read the comic books, which are certainly superior, why I would watch the film. But we may cover that at some point. So I think that's. So Sam, have you got any recommendations for our listeners of films to go forth from here to watch?
Yes. Now, the first of these, I'm not going to recommend the whole film, possibly because Rob might explode, but also because I don't think the whole film is particularly relevant, even though it's ostensibly about the same thing. I would just recommend the section of Interstellar that focuses on Matt Damon, because it's really interesting to compare the character that Matt Damon plays as the Doctor in Interstellar with when he turns, his attitude completely turns, to the character that he plays in The Martian. So I think that's a really interesting one.
Fair enough.
But I won't dwell too much on it for the sake of Rob's blood pressure. My second recommendation is a film I haven't seen in about 20 years. It's a film of my favourite book, and it's completely different from the book, but as we just established, that can be a good thing. I remember it at the time being a very interesting film. It's actually Minghell's adaptation of The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. And that, the sweeping vista, the introduction of lots of desert scapes, is something that is done particularly well by Minghella, and I'd be interested to go back and see what he does with that, and compare it to the scenes of the deserts here that they were filmed. I'm just looking it up. Filmed in Jordan and Hungary, which seem to be the two places that you types go to film films.
That's true.
But they reminded me very much of that desert landscape.
Fair enough. Well, I tossed around a couple of ideas for recommendations, and an early front runner that I'm not going to make one of your recommendations, but if we're checking out, is Apollo 13, obviously true story, trapped in space, same surprises. The two that I'm going to go with from recommendations, the first of all is a 2009 film called Moon. This stars Sam Rockwell, Kevin Spacey. It is directed by Duncan Jones, and it's about a solo miner on the moon coming to terms with his loneliness, and I mean it's much more kind of thrillery and mystery than a survival film, but it is basically one guy carrying almost the entire film by himself in space. It's probably more well known than my second recommendation. My second one is the 1972 film Silent Running. Silent Running.
Right.
Have you heard of Silent Running, Sam?
I have. Yeah. That wasn't a derisory laugh at all. That was a laugh of recognition. I
Fair enough.
wasn't expecting that to come from you, but I'm glad it did.
Yeah. So Silent Running basically is set in the far future. Earth is extinct. There is a ship travelling through space manned by Bruce Dern and some drones and some robots that is the last of humanity's plants. And he is ordered to destroy it. And it's about him, defying that order and that whole process of him by himself with these robots in this sort of the last human plants in the universe, basically. And how when people turn up to rescue him, it goes darker than Martian, but it's a brilliant film, and it's one that I've seen a couple of times, and I really dig it. And it is, I've got a list here in front of me, a book of films to cover at some point in the podcast, and it is on that list. At some point we may go there.
Oh, good.
But that's my recommendation for this week.
Oh, right. Well, actually, I've just remembered another one. Based on your last one there, I would just say, and it's completely off the wall, but you've just reminded me of it there, is the fantastic Pixar film WALL-E, which is just brilliant. And it says a lot of the same things, similar things about space travel and about being ecologically friendly and maybe about saving the human race. So I wouldn't say it's a companion piece to The Martian at all, but I just wanted to throw that in there. I love that film.
Well, not wishing to start another fight, I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
But then I have no soul, as we've often discussed.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool, guys. Well, if you want to check us out on Twitter, you can find us both at Prestige Podcast.
You can find just me at life_academic.
And then you can find just me, Rob, at Rob Kaiju.
And we should talk about next week.
We should. Sam.
Yes.
What are you
So,
watching?
next week we are watching a film that is entirely out of my comfort zone in the type of films I normally watch. I would never want to watch something from this genre normally, but I have heard great things about it, and I've heard of it being one of the best films to come out at the end of last year. So I'm interested to have a look at the recent film The Babadook.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen The Babadook.
Oh,
So I'm intrigued to see that. Excellent, cool.
Good.
Guys, to be emotional and heartfelt for a moment, this is our 25th episode of our podcast. And
hurrah! We survived.
We survived. At this point, our podcast is a young adult going out into the world. He's left university. I think that both Sam and I started this podcast as something fun for us to do. We've been friends for about 12 years, 20 years. And this was our film discussions on a podcast. It's been great to do it, and so it's kind of, from my point of view, I just want to say thank you for the guys out there who are listening, because it's been great fun doing it. It's been great to see guys out there kind of liking it and listening to it and kind of being part of that. So from my point of view, a big thanks to you guys.
And I would echo that. It's been brilliant. As Rob said, we started it as something fun that we wanted to do. Those of you who know Rob will know that he just tends to start new stuff if he gets bored, which he does every 5 minutes. But it's been a testament to how much we've enjoyed doing it, and how much other people appear to enjoy it, that we've carried on with that. So, yes, here's to 25 more, and then we'll be middle-aged.
Indeed. Right, guys, we shall see you all next week. See you then.
Bye!
Prestige is a Kaiju Industries production. Check out their other work at facebook.com/Kaiju Industries. Rawr! Arg.